Hello, everyone. I really want to say good morning, but then I realized that it might not be morning for everybody else, but it's morning for me. So, good morning if it's your morning, or good afternoon if it's your afternoon. Back again with the 99 Dev Problems podcast. Super pumped to be back. And today we have a really great guest. Ankit, I would love for you to introduce yourself. What do you do? What do you enjoy doing? Maybe a little hobbies, what your professional life includes, just whatever you want to share.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tessa, for inviting me here. I'm really excited for this session. So, about myself, I'm Ankit. I'm founder of Aviator. We are building a developer productivity platform for large engineering teams. And I'll definitely go a little bit more into it. Let me introduce myself first. So, I grew up in India. I went to school there and worked in a couple of companies. More interestingly, I worked in Adobe, where we built Flash Player for iPhone, if somebody remembers that. Uh,
I love
that,
Oh, that's
that was
amazing.
definitely an interesting time to be working in a company, very creative company, and obviously like fighting with another creative company. So obviously, at Adobe we lost that battle, but at that time I got an opportunity to move to US and join Google. So I was in Google for a few years
Wow.
here in Mountain View, and yeah, I mean, I think Google really turned me into a really good engineer. I would say, in the sense
Mm.
that I feel since then it's mostly been downhill. I left Google 10 years ago, but like but within Google, like, you kind of like, I still remember the first code review I did took me, I think, 2 weeks to get that merged because I got so many comments on it. And then
Oh, wow.
there's this concept of like code readability at Google, which essentially gives you the powers to actually review other people's code. So I submitted the same code to get my code readability, and it took another 2 weeks to get that readability. Basically, they give you a lot of feedback on that. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
like my first learning at Google, but I think it definitely made me a great engineer. Um, I left Google in 2014 with them, like I was in Silicon Valley, I really wanted to try out startups. So I ended up like joining a few startups. I led engineering in some of them. And
Mm.
it was definitely a very exciting and humbling experience at the same time. You learn kind of like a lot more about, what is technology outside of writing code. And kind of like it
Right.
makes you a more wholesome engineer. You kind of like start learning more about like business impact, all of those things. Uh,
Hmm.
that brings us to Aviator. So we started Aviator about, I would say, 3 years ago. And
Oh,
the real itch for me was, how do we solve our own problems? Like at Google, we used to have such amazing tools, right? And every
hmm.
startup that I worked in after that, it's like, okay, none of these things exist. So we have to build it. So I was,
Yeah.
unfortunately or fortunately, leading platform teams in most of those startups. So I was responsible for building a lot of those things, and I was like, there has to be better
Hmm.
ways. And that
Yep.
was the genesis of Aviator. And we were like, okay, we're gonna bring Google's productivity suite for everyone. And we started
Love it.
actually before the LLM and AI hype. And we were like, okay, we're gonna think about like how engineering productivity looks like, pre AI, and
Right.
obviously, LLM and AI changed everything. So now we also think a lot about like, what is engineering productivity, developer experience means in an AI era, and we build like
Yeah.
capabilities of that. So it goes all the way from like understanding how teams collaborate with each other, how you kind of like have like improve your code review experiences, find the right people, find the right owners, and then we kind of like go towards like how do we improve your merge capabilities and your delivery performance. So a lot of those
Mm.
kind of like, how do we improve your system and engineering performances and your software delivery performances at the same time. I also have a lot of takes on metrics and productivity and kind of like my hate against them. But before I go into all of this, I feel like this is going to a monologue, so I'm going to pause here and see if you have any questions.
No, this is absolutely perfect because honestly, like, we talked on the pre-show, right? Is like I wanted to get to know you and just understand sort of you and where you came from. And definitely a couple follow-up like points. I think, when I was more in my engineering space and we had talked about, being in I've been in DevRel for 10 years. Pre that, I was like, oh, if I ever work at Google, like I've made it, right? Like hashtag made it as a developer, just because of that, right? And so I've never worked there, never been exposed, don't understand how amazing all of that productivity suite is. But I do understand and have seen companies at larger sizes be able to be a lot more efficient, be a lot more productive, create those either internal tools or whatever that might look like to actually be more efficient. And so you're smart and going after that and learning everything so that you can later, dive into that startup world and all of that. So I love that. How was school in India? Like, I know that, obviously this is a very vague question, but I'm in the United States. So like, did you go for computer science? Like, how was school there? Did you enjoy it? Like, just love to hear a little bit about that.
It's funny, at least like you didn't ask whether I went to IIT, because that's like the first question almost everyone would ask if I talk about schooling in India. I actually did not go to IIT. I went to kind of like my state university, which is actually also like one of the top 20 universities in the country, but like it's
Mm,
lesser now. Um,
yeah.
Education in India is interesting. I think I would say the coursework itself is like pretty bland. Like you can kind of like study for a week in a semester and get through. I would say
Hmm.
the most interesting thing in our university was like, because it's also one of the top universities, like similar to IIT,
Mm.
getting into the school is really hard, which essentially meant is like,
Oh, okay.
most people who were around you were also like really smart. So you get to kind of like have
Mm.
that system of people who are really crazy smart. And then given you have given them so much time, we end up doing a lot of like extracurricular activities, which essentially meant like
Ooh.
we were building applications for like running online coding competitions, like we did like stock market simulations, we did like all these crazy stuff. And I think that was probably the most I've learned during the university, which I actually still carry forward, right? And I kind of like started doing some freelancing work because we had so much time. So it was just like you bring a lot of smart people together and you give them a lot of time, they actually will kind of like learn from each other and kind of like do amazing things. And I think that's how I would describe my experience as a student in school in India.
Oh my gosh, that sounds absolutely amazing. I'm like a 3 times college dropout. I've tried, but my learning style is very hands-on. I'm like, just throw me to the wolves. And so, formal education, it just doesn't work for me. But that sounds amazing. That kind of formal education, I think I can handle, right? I can sit through lectures if I get to go hang with other smart people and we get to build really cool stuff together.
Right, right. And we would skip also a lot of lectures.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so you shared why you built Aviator.
Mhm.
How is that going? Like, let's dive into that maybe a little bit. We had Jamie Tana on the show yesterday, and he does developer productivity at Elastic, which I was like, ooh,
Nice.
fun. I love talking about productivity. And then you
Yes.
coming on today talking about Aviator. And so I'm just like, what a good start to the week talking
There
about
you
productivity. So
go.
yeah, I'd love to maybe we can talk about sort of as you started to bring Aviator together. I think there are a lot of developers who really think about, hey, I want to go build this thing, but maybe they don't want to be a CEO, or maybe they don't know if someone needs it. So maybe like walk through that process. Like, how did that feel? Did you have a major validation and conviction on it, or were you kind of weren't sure? Like, I'd love to just sort of hear how that all sort of started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best thing about being a developer is you're not dependent on others, right? Like if you have an idea, you can go and build it. I guess like maybe
Yep.
in next year or two, that's changing very rapidly, where people you don't need to be even a developer to build things, and we can talk about
True.
certainly that too. But I think like at least I'm talking about like when we started it. Vast majority of the work that we're doing is like okay, we're just like really trying to understand how do we solve our own problems, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's like the best way to actually start a company because you understand the space deeply, right? Like you've been a
Yep.
consumer yourself, you've been kind of like user yourself, and you're essentially like trying to sell to similar people. So
Yep.
so I think like that really kind of like makes a big difference. And the way I started was like, okay, we there was something called merge queue. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Merge queue is essentially a way through which you can actually merge multiple changes together without breaking the build. Where if multiple
Hmm.
developers are actually touching the same pieces of code, it essentially catches those issues before they actually land in your main or master or like in your trunk branch.
Mm.
And that was a
Yep.
concept that actually in some ways existed. And I like Uber wrote a paper on that, like I think in 2018. And I built some of that
Hmm.
concept as like, okay, I'm going to use this internally in one of the startups that I used to work at. So obviously,
Sure.
like within the startup, everyone started using it, and then I was like, okay, there might be some commercial value. So I kind of like build that out as a commercial product, and that
Mm.
really started seeing some traction. So generally, what I would
Mm.
think about if somebody's like really thinking about starting a company is like look at like one of the problems that you've solved or like pinpoint you've experienced yourself, and try to build a product and put it out there. And I think there are already like great channels. Like obviously there's a lot of podcasts these days like yours, but like there's also sorry, not Hanger, the Hacker News. There's Reddit.
Yep.
There's a lot of different places where you distribute. And I think this is one thing as a developer which was very hard for me to do, is like put myself out there. And I think people don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about it as much as a developer. This is kind of like transition from a developer to a founder, is you really have to put it out there and kind of like actually not just build the product but like show it to people. I think like most people
Right.
will like on Hacker News and then forget about it, because like Hacker News can also be like, hit or miss. But you have to spend constantly a lot of time like writing content, like preaching some of these practices. And that's where I spend most of my time. And this was like I was just like a solo developer on this project. um,
Mm-hmm.
Really, once we got like enough interest, that's when we were like, okay, there is something here. And eventually I applied to Y Combinator, and luckily got into it. And after that, like it really became a company from a product, or like from a project.
Oh, that is so amazing. Like it's kind of one of those things, right? It's like it sounds easy. Just build a product and, go find some people that have the same pain and then, just apply to Y Combinator and just see what happens, right? But it's all like a lot of hard work. And I know, we were talking about this in the pre-show, is like as developers, sometimes it's hard for us to put ourselves out there like that and to really be that external sort of face and voice and start to build thought leadership. So do you have any tips there for folks, as they're diving into that? Or did you sort of just work your way through it yourself?
No, absolutely. So I would say it's definitely one of the hardest things, in the sense that, I actually did also a tweet about this, which was like semi-viral. I talked about, this is like 3 years ago. I talked about like how YC takes a bunch of like, smart engineers and turned them into salespeople. And I think
Ooh.
their model was really very well structured for this particular purpose.
Mhm.
Because what they
Yep.
do is like every week they kind of like put you together, is like, what's your progress, what have you done, how many customers have you talked to, right? And these are the questions, if they're asking you every week, it kind of like puts that pressure
Mhm.
on you to actually go out there and do it, right? There isn't really
Right.
like a form for it. Like you kind of like send out cold emails, you kind of like write content about it, you kind of like share it on Reddit and like a bunch of other channels. So it is definitely a lot of work, but I think the biggest thing is the mental block, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
uh, for us, like I think we were talking about it pre-show as well, is like writing code is being in your happy place, right? That's kind of like what we
Yes.
enjoy doing, right? And actually, like anything else is like really going out of your comfort zone. And it took a while, but now it feels more natural. Is like, yes, I want to talk to customers. I want to like understand their pain points. Like once you kind of like turn, one way to think about it is like in every conversation you're having with a customer, it's not about sales. It's more about understanding their
Mhm.
problem, right? And I
Yes.
like a really good like a solutions engineer is like, if you tell me a problem you have, I can actually build and solve it, right? If you kind of
Yeah.
like turn that way, I think like eventually sales will happen, right? Like the main thing
Right.
really is we trying to understand the problem that the customer has or the user has, and then kind of like going into like putting on their shoes and really understanding how do we actually, what's a great way to solve that.
Yeah. Man,
And
I mean,
I
and that
guess
is
that helps.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, keep going.
No, no,
I'm
I
sorry, I
think
didn't mean
that's
to cut you off.
go ahead.
No, I was just apologizing for cutting you off, so we're all good. Keep going.
No, I think like all I'm saying is like I think that really helps. There was
Yeah.
actually, I mean, I would call out at least like my friend Christopher Fong on the show, but like he invited me. So when I left Google, we also started, with my friend Christopher Fong, we started a community called Zoogler, which is a community of ex Googlers, and that's what was my first ever, I would say, proper work as a non-engineer, where we kind of like
Mm.
helped a lot founders, help kind of like run a lot of events and like grow that community. Today that community is over 30,000 members.
Wow.
But all of them are ex-googlers. But like this actually helped me like not just build my network but also really learn a lot more about like the startups and the businesses. We invest now in a bunch of startups as well through that. But like it built a lot of like building blocks for me, which helped me start this
Mm.
company.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I love that. I really feel like you were talking about in the pre-show, right, as developers, and you're so right. Like we love to just like be in the code and like be in our happy place writing code and building stuff, you know? But I think, like secondary to that, I think what you did with ex Googlers is also something that feels really, that resonates with me at least. And I know it resonates with a lot of other developers is like just bringing your people together, right? And so even, yes, you had some founders in there and you had some other different personas in that community, it's still a lot of people that sort of resonate and I guess are technically minded like us, right? And so it's just nice to bring those kinds of people together and just have that space to be able to engage. And so I'm sure that that probably gave you a lot of insights into, hey, how do I bring developers together for Aviator and start to actually get that off of the ground?
Right, absolutely. In fact, like, I mean, I will also plug in. We started our own community. We call it Hangar DX. Hangar is like,
Mm,
Aviator is the planes. Hangar is like a place where you park your planes. And
love it.
that has been great as well. Like, it's called dx.community. If anybody wants to check it out, that's a website. We
Ooh,
run a lot of like
awesome.
virtual events. We run kind of like in-person events. In fact, now we have partner events. So tomorrow, actually, we are hosting an event at Salesforce with Slack, where we are bringing like
Ooh.
35 like engineering leaders talking about like many of these like challenges in developer experience, and we keep it like
Mm-hmm.
almost, and like my ethos has always been kind of like understanding the problems, and we keep it very low sales. So in the sense like I just do a quick introduction, 5 minutes, and then we just break the group down into roundtables, and we discuss technical topics on how do we
Ooh.
improve developer experience, what are the challenges we have, especially kind of like with the AI. There's a lot of like talk and concerns about AI, so we talk a lot about that. But the best thing is
Yeah.
like one, we are putting ourselves out there where people get to know us. But two is like
Mm-hmm.
I go back with like full pages of notes. Is like these are the things that
Right.
people talk about. These are the things people care about, and it. This is like one of the biggest places where we get most of our material for any of our product roadmap. So we take many of these things very, very religiously and seriously, and brings us so much more insight than any other company would ever have. Just because it's not just from one company, now we are learning from like 30 different companies at the same room.
Right. Oh, that's so smart. It's interesting. So when, obviously, like we were kind of talking about DevRel and all the things and bringing developers together, and it's so interesting. I found this customer-led framework type of a book like early in starting my business last year, and I was reading through it, and I was like, "Wow, this like such." It just everything resonated. I was like, "This is beautiful." It was to me, it felt like some clarity around what feels really muddy, right? Bringing developers together, building an ecosystem with developers, it can feel very straightforward and but then the next day can feel very painful. And so when I was reading this book, I was just like everything was resonating and talking about interviews and jobs to be done, right? And really understanding the pains and gains essentially of a developer. And I was just like, this is DevRel. Like I never had a way to explain it or think about it or sort of put a label on it. And it really is that. And it sounds like your company is not only like prioritizing this, but also like really just spreading the goodness of this customer led mentality with developers. Because at the end of the day, right, they're very intricate and different people. We just want to
Right.
build, we want to write code, we want to solve awesome problems and help other people solve awesome technical problems. And so, you're really like bringing that customer led approach, straight and front. And I think that's just beautiful, right? Because it is about understanding what the developers need. If a developer comes to your website and you're not explaining exactly how you can help them solve a problem that they have, like they're gone and you don't even know that they even came to your website to begin with. So I love that so much. My entire business is focused around really truly talking to your developers and actually knowing what they deeply want. So I love to hear that. Do you have any tips or secrets for how you facilitate some of the sort of maybe not customer but could be customer and also sort of prospects? Like is there anything that besides these amazing events that you like to do to sort of get some of that feedback and insights out of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I can probably also talk a little bit about like how the community is built, right? Because I took a
Mm,
lot of learning from like running the Zoogla community to start this community. The reason
for
why
sure.
Zoogla community works is twofold. One is we focus very heavily on in-person events. I know there's a lot of
Mm,
communities who are like just back channels, and that doesn't
yep.
really like bring that camaraderie. So you really need people in person. Like you can do it virtually. Like I think events don't need to be in person, but like you need to at least have be able to see your users faces. right? And kind of like be
Yep.
able to
Agreed.
connect to that level. I think Slack doesn't really like cut it that way. So that was something we
Agreed.
did from the beginning. So obviously we started Joomla community over 10 years ago, and we actually just celebrated our 10th anniversary for the community.
Yay.
But yeah, like this was like pre-COVID, like in-person event was a very common thing. So we just literally started with in-person events. We were doing very few virtual. Now I would say it's about half and half, probably even more than half are
Hmm.
virtual and some are still in person. The other thing that we did for the community, which was definitely very important, which kind of like felt natural in the Zoogler community, was this was only for ex-Googlers. So we were very strict on who
Yep.
added to the community. So we would like make sure,
Sure.
okay, if they're not Googlers, they will not be added. And that essentially made sure, like, anything that you're sharing, anything you're talking, you're still kind of like following a little bit of that Google culture. And then you're also able to
Sure.
connect with people in the same space where kind of like, oh, we worked in the same team. Like, there's very easy to form those connections that you may have lost. So that
Yeah.
brings to like Hangar community. So when we started Hangar DX, this was 2 years ago, there was one very clear guideline that we wanted to follow, especially from coming from Zoogle community, which is like we're gonna keep this as a close knit group, and that is still
Hmm.
true. Except about like a third of the applicants who sign up, and what we do is essentially these are the people who are working in particularly like platform and developer experience in their organizations.
Oh, yep. Yep.
So that's
I
when
love
kind of
that.
like that's kind of like how you're bringing all of these like directors and VPs. I would say like even most of our community is not ICs. Most vast majority are like directors and VPs. But there are
Hmm.
these directors and VPs who are running the platform orgs, and they're kind of like
Right.
because of that, like how small this platform space itself is. Like now we actually make these connections of people who have worked together like 5-10 years ago, right? And then we have
Aw.
and then we have like amazing people who show up in our events, like Kent Beck, who wrote test driven development. He shows up to many of our events pretty regularly, the virtual ones. And then Max Kanath Alexander, who wrote like the code review guidelines at Google. He's a very regular attendee as well. He like led the productivity at LinkedIn after that. So just kind of like the we have like always focus on quality over quantity, and kind of like
Hmm.
still like maybe 400 members, and but they're like really high quality 400 members, and we learn so much from them. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably what really keeps like the community very special for us.
That's really smart. And honestly, I completely agree, right? I've had years of building different types of developer communities. Gosh, I don't even know how many developer communities I've built at this point in time. Um, that makes me really happy now that I say that and think about it. It's been so many. But I agree, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to always be in person. Sometimes there's a bit of a barrier with that, right? But I do think whenever someone can go face to face and just see facial expressions, understand even just a little bit of social cues, right? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? It just brings people together. And then your approach, right, to make it very, I don't want to say like exclusive, but a little bit, right? It's like it's just these very specific people, you know exactly what you're looking for.
Right.
It allows them to like be able to feel safe, right? They know that they're with their peers. They know that they're with like-minded people. They can start sharing things. Obviously, if it's also, exclusive in a way, it's like it's also sort of behind closed doors in a sense of, hey, I can talk about this super complicated problem we're having that I can't talk about publicly, but I can talk about it with this peer in this community. And that's just so incredibly valuable. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about like building that trust, right? And in some ways kind of like
Yes.
we also are part of that trust too, right? Like, for instance, all these virtual events that we host, we call them off the record. So we make sure like nobody's kind of like having
Mm,
stickers on. We kind of like don't record these Zoom sessions, and then people like are very open about talking stuff, right? Like, and they don't need to get permissions from their organization to talk about these things because they know it's off the
yes.
record. It's not gonna kind of like show up in
Right.
PR. So like all of those things, we have to build trust. We have to kind of like be very strict about some of those things. But like this is kind of like something which makes these events, these conversations very special. And yes, kind of like also very candid.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that so much. Okay, so I'm think I have like, my default questions. I want to think if there's anything.
I
Okay,
can
I
talk
have
about something I wanted to share. I don't know, it might be
yeah.
completely off the rails here, but like I do want to talk about developer productivity in general,
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
I mean, obviously you had a session yesterday as well. So there is, at least when we talk to developers and we talk about developer productivity, many times developers will kind of like have like a little bit of PTSD, and I think part of the reason is that whenever most of the time in the last I would say, 10 years, when we think about developer productivity, most of the times we think about metrics. And
Mm.
as
True.
an organization, we have taken a very strong stance against metrics in the sense that we want developer productivity, or rather developer experience. We actually like to call it developer experience versus productivity. Is more about like, how do we actually like solve these problems for developers versus show
Hmm.
shiny dashboards to the leadership, right? So even though we are kind of like, a very enterprise product, like most of our customers are like over 100 developers in the organizations, we predominantly focus on how do we kind of like automate some of these workflows for developers, and
Hmm.
kind of like actually help improve those metrics. Even though, so for instance, like one of our products is release management, which is about like how do you enable any developer in the organization to be able to manage deploys, rollbacks, cherry picks, all of those things without worry, right? And this is
Yes.
very important to kind of like promote trunk-based development and get to continuous delivery. Now, all of those things, these are some of the things which are very, very critical when it comes to like DORA metrics, which is considered sort of like one of the gold standards around like engineering software delivery productivity metrics. But we don't give them DORA metrics. It's like if you want DORA metrics, you go
Mm.
somewhere. Like
Got
if
it.
you come, we're actually we have a product that helps you improve those metrics, but we're not the company who actually gives you metrics, right? So this
Yep.
is something which we very strongly believe, largely because we are in the space of like solving problems. Like if you just want to kind of like know how your organization is doing, there are tons of companies you can go to, right?
Hmm.
And um, and the other thing I think, which is also now getting more interesting, is because of AI. A lot of like how software development lifecycle used to exist is now collapsing, right? Like you have like much smaller teams, you have like a lot more responsibility, the code is getting created a lot more, right? Like in the sense that every change is getting larger and larger. So what that means is um, the way we used to measure productivity is like completely useless today, right? Like if you think about it, if you were talking about like lines of code, you were talking about like number of pull requests, we're talking about like story points, all of those things, like those don't mean anything at all, right? Like today, what matters is like, do you really understand the problems well? Can you actually
Hmm.
deliver right value to the customer in time and create quality product, right? I think like the actual act of writing code is going to get lesser and lesser important. I think what will get more important is, can you actually verify code well? I feel like quality assurance will become a lot more important. Verification, code reviews, those things will become a lot more important than the traditional like
I agree.
aspect of it. And I think that's where kind of like we really have to take a new position in what really developer productivity or developer experience even mean. And that's kind
I
of like what
fully.
I'm very excited about in the space where we are today.
Yeah, well, I got super excited with what you were sharing too, because also when you look at things in this way, right, especially like you were saying with all the changes in AI, and honestly, I think that's the one thing when I launched this podcast and started doing early events, that was something that was like very frequent of like, oh, my manager is pushing our team to be more productive with AI, right? And so they're like, what does that mean? And there's just that pressure there. But when they have a system or an approach behind it, like not only does that make them have a sense of like, oh, thank goodness, right? Like I don't have to feel like I have to try to, yeah, story points, shivers. I have to try to like be a faster or better developer, right? It's more about like being enabled to not have to deal with those pain points every day. Like Jamie talked about that yesterday, right? He's constantly like, what he does is go around and just solve pain points so everyone else can just do their job.
Right.
And so what you were saying, like, it just got me so excited too, because I think with AI and everything that's going on, there's not really a space for junior developers right now. It's hard to get in, find an early role. Folks are utilizing AI or different tools to kind of supplement that role. But when they have a product like Aviator, or at least sort of this workflow and this kind of situation, it enables them to feel empowered to not just do junior type of tasks, right? You're actually showing them how to get into release management, showing them how to do great code reviews, right? Like all the things that start to build and create these beautiful engineers, like you learned at Google, right? So, wow, that's so amazing. I love that so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has definitely like also been an amazing time to be a developer and being in this space. It's like we were talking about pre-show as well. It's like software engineering is changing so much so rapidly. It's like
Mm-hmm.
in some ways we were also talking about like how as a founder, it's really hard to make time to actually like even build things and like making time, like because coding is such a happy place to be in. Like, I enjoy coding so much, but like as a founder, you really have to spend a lot of time doing other things, which means like,
Yep.
as all of these new tools come in, I have to actually carve out time. It's like, oh, I want to like try out like Cloud Code. I actually spend the entire like Saturday night, like hacking using Cloud Code, because I was like, I really want to see how much it can do. And I was pleasantly
Yeah.
surprised. Obviously there were like a lot of challenges, there's so much learning still, there's like a lot of improvements that can be done, but like I was very impressed with kind of like the state of AI today with some of these like coding tools. And I would encourage everyone to at least like give it a shot. I know it's kind of like still very biased, that people kind of like sometimes people are very much in favor of, it's like, oh, like developers are gonna lose their jobs, and some people are like, oh, this is shit, like it's not gonna be useful. I think there's like reality is somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think people are gonna
Yeah.
lose as
I
many
agree.
jobs, but at the same time you can really get so much value where a lot of like boilerplate code, a lot of like simpler aspects can be actually built. You can consider this as sort of like a tool that you can like brainstorm ideas with, and kind of like build prototypes with the expectations that like it is your responsibility to actually give the guidance, do the verification, and kind of like iterate on it. So kind of like if
Yep.
you take that mindset, the possibilities are amazing, and I think these tools are amazing. The main thing is like really having that time to actually go and use these tools. And as a founder, I think really you have to carve out times, like for every founder, whether you're in developer tool space or not. I think as a founder you really have to be a little bit more hands-on than how founders used to be like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, there's so many things that you said that I wanted to like sort of dive into there. I think what's really interesting about that too is like there was a post the other day, and it's actually from the founder of Warp. So Zach had posted it, and he was talking about how he's trying to get his senior engineers to start all of their projects with an AI prompt. And I was like, is this a joke? Like, are you serious? Like, because right now when I go in and actually code with AI, I feel like I have more technical debt, but I still also have some revelations, right? And so I do agree with you that there is this like really happy place, and of course it's going to keep getting better, right? I utilized some of it 6 months ago and even go back and I'm like, whoa, okay, this is way better than it used to be. But I think more than ever, like you said, it's so important to have those workflows and that productivity suite in place, because there's more, it's more important than ever to do really thorough code reviews, because that was sort of my rebuttal is like, you can get some
Right.
really great results, but I feel like about 20 to 30 minutes in, it kind of starts losing its mind a little bit. And you're like, wait a minute, let's get back on track, right? You're sort of working with some technical debt that you're trying to address. Where does this go? How do I actually need to operate? But I agree with you, right? I think it's a beautiful place that we're in right now to really have this opportunity, because so I taught myself how to code, obviously talking about being a 3 times college dropout. And I had like W3 schools, and like that's it. I had to dig into like source code and other projects, right? I didn't have anything that was going to teach me. And man, if I had AI when I was learning, there's it could have been amazing, because you can just go in there and be like, hey, what am I doing wrong, right? How do I make this happen? How do I think about this? And I think that it really gives us a space to just have sort of like a rubber ducky kind of person. For anyone who doesn't know the term rubber ducky, it's explaining a problem, and then all of a sudden you're like, aha, I figured it out because you just had to explain it. But it's nice to just have that like rubber ducky sort of person that you can actually go to and just kind of bounce ideas off of. So I fully agree.
Right. I mean, it's like an interactive rubber ducky, right? It can actually give you a response
Yes.
back too, right? So which is amazing. Yeah. By the way, I mean, I've loved W3 schools. A lot of my initial, like learning of like web technologies actually came from that, right? I was just talking about like,
Right.
how our school was really give us a lot of time to actually like explore and learn different things. And this was one
Hmm.
thing, like I spent so much time on W3 schools, really understanding. Back in the days, PHP was big. So I learned a lot of PHP. That was my really like
Same.
initial exposure to web development, but like really helped me kind of like understand a lot of those things. And yes, I think AI is definitely like changing a lot of that today.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Ooh, well, this has been such a good conversation. I have one question, and this is more curiosity. Why did you name it Aviator?
Well, actually, I don't have it here. Like, it's funny because like I actually always wear aviator sunglasses, and people ask
Mm.
me because like you call your company aviator that you wear sunglasses. There you go. There you go.
Yep.
I don't think it's the other way around. It's actually like because I wear aviator sunglasses, the company is called Aviator. No, I think like some of it was also really like when we were brainstorming on like what we should be calling, because like we're helping developers, assisting them. Our original thought process was going to call it Copilot, and I'm so glad we didn't call it Copilot.
Oh, I'm so glad you didn't.
because such an overloaded term. But yes, like in some ways, like for us, it was like in some ways we are guiding the developers to kind of like really
Hmm.
understand. Or like kind of like with these workflows. So for Aviator is sort of like this kind of like a pilot who's kind of like
Yep.
helping guide the developers through the journey of software development.
Well, I'm so glad you named it Aviator, which is still fun because then they're the spin on Copilot, right? You can have all these other companies that have their Copilot tools all named the same thing, but then you sort of have the theme, right? The essence,
There you
the
go.
actual Aviator vibe, right? I love that. I love that. Is there anything else you'd love to share with the guests while we're here?
Let's see. I mean, given like a lot of your guests are also like developers, I would love to kind of like them
Mhm.
check it out. Like we also have like this open source CLI. We call it like Stack PRs, which essentially like help you
Ooh.
like break down your changes into like smaller PRs and review. Like there's a lot of like we have a lot
Mm.
of around like why smaller PRs are important, especially in the AI world when there's like AI is actually increasing the size of your code changes that you're submitting, which causes like also issues because now the burden is on the reviewer to actually review those changes in an efficient way. But like with
Yep.
Stack PRs, you can actually break those down into smaller PRs and kind of like submit those for review, which makes it a lot easier for the review to actually like go and do this. And this is completely open source
Mm.
free. You don't need to create an account for Aviator to try out these tools. And obviously, like if you have any feedback on any of the Aviator capabilities, please come and ping me. It's ankit@aviator.co.
I love that so much because you're developer led, right? Developers first and understanding their pains and gains and how you can provide them. So,
Absolutely.
where should they go to find that tool? Website URL or
You can just go to aviator.co and you can find Stack PR somewhere on our website easily. Yeah.
okay,
And you can also
awesome.
look for our documentation. It has pretty comprehensive documentation around that too.
I love that. Okay, so if you don't mind, one kind of last follow up that I like to ask. You said that you wrote, started in PHP, or I should say, dove into PHP. That's actually my original language as well. I feel like that's like the gateway into being an engineer is PHP. Maybe it's also timing. It was something that was very,
I
very
think
popular.
I feel like
That it
these
got,
days it's mostly TypeScript, like kind of like Next.js,
yeah,
React, and things are becoming more popular for sure.
yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite stack today? Like, what would you, if you were like, okay, I get to come out of my founder space and I'm going to go write some code and build some things. What do you like to work in?
I still enjoy predominantly Python. Like I think that's kind of like also
Nice.
like our application stack today. It's just kind
Yep.
of like a very flexible language, very easy to write. Kind of like you can do very easy scripting. You can like write applications and like build very large scale things. And you can do a lot of like machine learning stuff. Like that's also still a more preferred language for ML. So it just like feels
Yeah.
very versatile and kind of like robust in the sense that you can do a lot of things. And yes, there are
Hmm.
like some performance issues, kind of like at large scale. You don't want to run like complex data pipelines type of things through that. But honestly, it still works 90% of the time, like use cases. So I think yeah, like that's why I really enjoy Python.
I love that. Well, I mean, I feel like Python, I don't know, it gets sort of its love in the beginning because it's such a great language to sort of like learn and like dive into. And then, oh, I love that, Michael, popping that up. PHP and Drupal is where he started also. But I feel like it's really shining bright now with LLMs and AI of just this ability to sort of like have that very data centric capability. So that's amazing. I actually
Totally.
have never written in Python, so I think I need to dive into that. That needs to be one of my put it on our bucket list of like when we have time to go in and write some code and hang out, go do that.
No, absolutely. And also these days, like I think LLMs are just making some of these programming languages just, one, like also they do use a lot of like Python and TypeScript type stuff, but like two is like you don't even need to know a language very well to kind of like use these tools, right? Like because as long as you're a good developer, as well, you can understand some of the code flows. Picking up a
Yep.
language these days is pretty easy.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, especially now that we have AI as our little rubber ducky pal, right? We can pretty much work through anything.
There you go.
Well, yeah, this has been amazing. Love, if folks check out Aviator, I'd love to hear about it too. So if anyone does go to check it out, let me know what you think. I'm not in an engineering space anymore, so I will not get the beautiful pleasure of building that unless I all of a sudden completely shift what I'm working on. But it's been fabulous to spend some time with you this morning and telling your story. Yeah, where can folks find you as sort of a final CTA so they can track you down and share feedback or, ask you about whatever you've been building?
Yeah, totally. Like, feel free to DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open. My handle is Ankit XG for ex Googler. And otherwise, you can find me
Ooh,
easily on LinkedIn or email me ankit@aviator.co.
I love that. Well, thank you for being on the show. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Same with everyone else. And I'll see folks on Thursday.
Thank you so much for having me, Tessa. This was fun.
Of course.